funded by
Hi, darling. How's my hair?
Beautiful.
and it's part of the
Steph,
price.
can you send that picture that I took to my mom? I took it.
But we want to go deeper. We want to like take over the grocery store there
Yeah, it's amazing.
because it's awful what the options, and we just want
Let's look very
to
serious
bring
at your
healthy
husband.
food to these underserved neighborhoods. So it's been really amazing
When did you start?
during COVID. That's all there was. Yeah, 16 months. Yeah,
No, it's over.
yeah, yeah.
I bet you love the other part now.
I love knowing that food now is my language for change.
Oh, thank you.
You know,
Thank you so much.
yeah.
It's true about the education. I my,
One of his best friends
Good to see you.
died.
And you're good.
But, our Tawarivaki was an oncologist, and she still practices every Monday.
And I love Oneki and
Yeah.
doing my literature.
Oh, yeah. Side by side. Side by side. No, it's fine. You ready to start?
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the United Nations Climate Change Panel on Climate Success by Low Impact Business Models, How to Recalibrate Industries. I'm Emily Chan, and I'm Sustainability Editor at Vogue, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion. And I'm delighted to be joined by a wonderful panel featuring Gabriela Hearst, Creative Director at Chloé and Gabriela Hearst, Daniel Humm, chef and owner of 11 Madison Park, and Dustin Yellin, artist and founder of Pioneer Works. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Now, I'm really excited for the discussion because not only are you three leaders in your respective industries, but I know that you three are also very good friends, and there's a lot of synergy between the work that you're doing. So I wondered, Gabriela, maybe we could start with you, and maybe you could tell us a bit about the work that you're doing at Gabriela Hearst and at Chloé, and how you're kind of creating change in fashion.
So I always like to start with the past, and that's my mother. People think it's me, but it's her, and she's actually there right now. She lives there, and it's where my family has lived for 170 years, and that's my mom and me. And so everything I learned about sustainability and quality was how my narrow pathways were formed growing up in this ranch. And there was no television, there was just radio that you can get other symphonies. So imagination was my main toy, and obviously animals and horses. And Gabriela Hearst was created. I've been working in fashion, but mostly in the contemporary sector, and this idea came to create a new collection, a new brand with my husband Austin, about bringing the values of the ranching that I grew up with. After my dad passed away, I felt, why create something that's needed? It needs to have long-term view and sustainability. I felt that if you're going to make a product, if you're going to put something out there, it has to be superior than whatever it is there to take that space and the natural resources. So that was the principle, and it became a practice, sustainability. And like every practice, you start with something that you can manage at the beginning, and as you take your challenges, we change our packaging to biodegradable, compostable hangers in 2017. And for a small brand like us to do that was a big endeavor. Then when I was in the drought in Kenya in 2017 as well, that would really accelerated the process for me to do more, in the sense that I saw with my own eyes what climate injustice was. And then on, we went in tackling certain things such as measuring our carbon footprint. We were the first show to do this, because I was thinking, how can we lower something that we do not know the number? So first we have to start taking measurements to be checked. Then we implement all the digital traceability. That's with something that was done in Uruguay before in fashion with Yellin, and then it became a research and development spot. And when the opportunity of Chloé came, or the opportunity I took, because it was really not like I'm going for this, it was to elevate and see if those ideas and those concepts could be amplified in a bigger platform. It's actually the wool from the ranch. So that's more or less where I started and where I am going now.
Yeah, and we should say that Chloé recently got certified as a B Corp, and you haven't been there that long, but you've already made a lot of progress. And I wondered what that says in terms of, the amount of progress you've managed to make in, a relatively short time. I think your first collection was had 4 times the amount of sustainable materials as the same collection the previous year. So I wondered if you could maybe just touch upon that as well.
It's all relative, right? Because I feel like we haven't done enough. So I've been told all the time, B Corp was a process that started before I joined, but the process of joining in has happened. And what B Corp is, and it actually was led by Odd, that's here with us, and it is it's a process of accountability, right? Where in the food industry you can say this apple is organic or this not, this is grass-fed beef or it's not. In fashion, there's not a lot of accountability where it comes to that. And B Corp is the most serious certification that you can get from a perspective of you have to be accountable of what you say and what you do. And it's a very long bureaucratic process that takes us a high level of manpower and commitment. And to put it in simple words, it's about looking at yourself in the mirror and being accountable for what you do and say as a company. So for me, it's something that I'm very proud that we did, and I'm very proud because it can also set an example for other companies to do. And as a start, that's Chloé Craft too. That's something we launched in this past collection, which is to show the work that it's done entirely by hand. And we use the symbol of this, the spiral, because people are forgetting that how something that it can be 100% handmade and only the human hand can make it. So it's all those elements that are holistically being implemented.
Yeah, amazing. And Daniel, I wanted to turn to you next, because I know that you made a very big decision during the pandemic to go completely plant-based at 11 Madison Park, one of the world's most renowned restaurants. So I wondered if you could maybe talk a bit about how you came to that decision and where that takes us when it comes to thinking about this idea of climate success.
I got to go back a little bit, but in 2017, our restaurant was named #1 in the world. And this was sort of the last accolade of many that I've been chasing for my entire career, from the Michelin stars to the New York Times stars, and then to this ranking. And I think the journey to get to this place was very satisfying, and sort of a goal that was easy to understand and to motivate the team with. But when we arrived there, it felt quite empty, and I felt sort of disoriented, because now I didn't know when I was waking up in the morning exactly why I was waking up and where are we going next. And people would always say, what's next, what's next, what's next? And it was difficult for me. And then COVID happens, and you have to imagine that 11 Madison Park had never an empty seat since 2009, like not an empty seat. And it was on March 16th where we were open the last night, and then the city shut down, and the very next day we were closed, and we were closed for 16 whole months. So the very few first days, it was just heartbreaking, hard to understand what to do. We lost almost all of our staff because people went back to, a lot of people were on visas and people had to go back to where they're coming from. And this was a team that worked together for like 10 plus years. So it was heartbreaking. But the only way I knew what I could do is to turn 11 Madison Park into a community kitchen instantly, because I had chefs, I had a kitchen, and I had access to the farmers who were sitting on a lot of food. And we started cooking meals for people in need. And the need, before the pandemic, there was 1 million people food insecure, 1 million out of 8 million. And when the pandemic started, it became 2 million. So the need was massive. And it changed my life. The work was very enriching. I spent time in neighborhoods I've never really spent time in. I met wonderful people. I saw a lot of suffering, but we could really make a difference with food. And during that time, well, number one, our restaurant was facing bankruptcy because we had no income at all. So the future of 11 Madison Park was very unclear, but also I had my personal struggles with the idea of going back to having a luxury restaurant, as I'm seeing this need of food in a whole new way. And I didn't know if it felt right to have such a luxurious restaurant in a place where there are people who have no food. And so I was going through that, but then eventually I realized the amazing platform 11 Madison Park is and has given me, and the voice I have in our industry. And I know that the future is plant-based. There's no way around it. We need to eat more plants. And so if we're going there, if we're going into that direction, we might as well make it beautiful and delicious and luxurious. We should put our energy, our creative energy, towards that future. I don't think the world needs another preparation of a butter poached lobster or another foie gras or another, roasted duck. It just doesn't. So I decided to reopen the restaurant entirely plant-based. We've been reopened since 6 months, and it's definitely, made a lot of, it's been a radical change for sure.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people will have had similar reflections during the pandemic about kind of their purpose, and it's so amazing that you've managed to, create a real transformation within a relatively short space of time, as I was saying to Gabriela as well. So that's really incredible to hear.
I think one very powerful experience for me was, I always would say like, oh, I'm not a materialistic person, and I don't consider myself as such. But when you get to the place of possibly going bankrupt and possibly actually losing everything you love, in that moment, that's a very intense experience. But at the same time, it's one of the most beautiful experiences that I've experienced, because it sets you free completely. And when you get to a place where you're saying, wow, I'm going to be okay with not having any of these things, because everything there is to need is inside of me, that was very powerful, and I think that allowed me to have the courage to make this drastic change.
Yeah, and it seems to be really about values and putting values at the forefront of the business as well. And so I wanted to turn to Dustin, to you next, because I think you come to this conversation with a really unique perspective. I know the work that you're doing is very much about bringing together artists, but also scientists, and kind of creating community to really tackle some of the biggest challenges we're facing today, including climate change. So I wondered if you could maybe talk a bit about that.
Well, hello. You know, something I'm always asking everyone when I meet them, is what do you feel is the most pressing issue facing our species? It's a question I'm constantly asking myself and everyone around me. And I think, in this room, I think the consensus is going to be climate. Is that true? But I think our climate, it's like our Earth has a climate, but so does our souls, right? Just like a planet might have gravity, an atmosphere, so might a human. And the idea of climate is an interesting one. And we talk a lot about warming, and we talk a lot about this idea of 1.5 degrees. And like our bodies, when they raise a couple of degrees, a lot of change occurs. So it will in the Earth. And I fear, as much as I would like for us to avoid this 1.5 degree, I fear we will not. And so I think we should do everything in our power to employ and deploy new technologies. And I think everyone in the developing world is going to want an air conditioner. So we need to figure out how to make those better. And like we're making our cars and hopefully our houses. But the real crisis that I often think about is one of imagination. It's one of our species being stuck in these old narratives, right? The narrative of the state, of the border, religion and race, like old ideas that for thousands of years have been within us. Yet here we are, sort of the physics of a quantum organism, right? We're starting to be conscious of that. And I think that's the thing we have to scale as fast as possible. I think we have to figure out not about only 1.5 degrees, but how do we as a species love each other enough, find enough commonality within each other to truly put our hands out when you're not seeing, 20 million people migrating, but you're seeing 300 million migrating, and you're seeing, massive displacements, and two things could happen. We could go into the next dark age, which, Yuval Harari or Jared Diamond, there's many people who might point to that, or together, and I see this place that we're in as hopefully it's supposed to be a bit of a spark, right? You all are here, I imagine, to like a fucking spark, right? And so those are our challenges. I'm trying to put a boat up. Do you know what that is? Super tanker. It's a technology they used. There you go. That's just something they cut up. It's in terrible conditions to use the steel again. So I want to reuse it, and I want to put it on its nose, and then I want people to pay to go up to the bridge, and I want that money to be deployed to conservation, to consciousness around climate. And I want kids who don't maybe understand these relationships, the relationships of the environment, or maybe whose parents don't, so they have been subjected to ideas. I want their minds to get changed through the visitor experience. So I want to work with friends to use satellite data, telescopes pointing back at the Earth, that's tracking it. I want that knowledge. A lot of it's about transparency, of sharing, like what really is happening in Indonesia. Like, has anybody here been to Madagascar? So the lemurs are really cute, and you want to play with them, but it's an ecological disaster. And the very little bit that's left, people are going after that too. So, I really think our education system, the primary system that we still use, was created before the internet, before the Industrial Revolution. Think about that. our systems to learn are still living in a place where an internet and an industrial age had not happened yet. How do we prepare for the crises that are going to happen, for cities that need to be moved and people that need to build completely new infrastructure globally, if our systems to teach our children haven't even been updated?
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting that you're talking about, this lack of imagination that we seem to be suffering from, and particularly linked to this topic of climate success as well, because I think, a lot of the conversations around the climate crisis are about, making things less bad rather than imagining a better future or imagining what a better world might look like. And so I wondered, and I know this is something that, Gabriela, you're very passionate about as well, this kind of term climate success. So I wondered maybe if you could talk a bit about, what that means to you and why it's about climate success and maybe not some of the other terminology that, gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah, but before I want to add two things to what Daniel said and Dustin said. I had the privilege to be next as a friend to Daniel while he went to this transition, and honestly I have not seen so much bravery. He maybe was like down for 2 or 3 days, but he stood up and he changed for good. He used his circumstances for good. And and when he decided to go plant-based, I literally was like, are you sure? You're famous for your duck. And he's like, thank God he doesn't listen, and he does what he sees, and that was really, really brave. And to Dustin's point on education, I have to say that it's serendipitous, because yesterday I visited Dumfries House, and there's a new system of education that is emerging in different places, and that's one which is really, people should go check out. And it's here in Scotland. So going back to climate success, which is a little bit of what Dustin is saying, we are here to create, we can use different elements, quantum physics, imagination, programming our brain, all the different things, but we're here to create how that future is gonna take. I've had a method in my life that I've used since I'm 20, and people have always kind of joke. I have a friend, you still have your list. So every time I have an anxiety, I put down, and I call it my wish list, what I want that to be. So everything I've achieved in my life, personal, professional, for others, because I wish for others as well, it's on this list. And so I suffer climate anxiety, as most people do, when they see clearly what can happen if, as where we're moving. So I write climate success, and it's like a mantra, right? I say to myself, climate success, and because we can really picture and visualize the end of our species really good, but we do not, it's harder to syntonize on the betterment of our species, on the evolution of our species. And yes, we are gonna have to pay for the excesses that we've done, that I'm not taking out the accountability nor saying this is gonna be an easy path, but we have to start projecting and imagining what the solutions are. And Daniel always refers, I'm an expert of I'm not going to use your words, but basically whatever we do in our path, it needs to be in direction to that action, and give ourselves fully.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to, because I think it's really interesting, Dustin, you were talking about education, and then Daniel, I know that a lot of the work that you're doing now is kind of based around social impact and, redistributing food waste to those in need. And I wondered, how much is this, this idea of purpose and, we're talking about low impact businesses, but in an environmental sense, it's also about having a high amount of social impact as well, and that can be part of the kind of positive social impact. That can be part of the climate success conversation. So I wondered if you could maybe touch a bit upon that.
I think anyone has a responsibility in this room and elsewhere, to think about climate. Some people have a bigger platform. Others have smaller ways of contributing, but it should be on everyone's minds. And I want to say two things. I want to say one thing about luxury, and then I want to say one thing about the animal production. And the thing about luxury is that, look, we are all selling expensive products, and it costs a lot to come to 11 Madison Park to eat. And one could say, and people have said it, what does it really, make a difference if 11 Madison Park is making this change? Very few people can experience it, and there is some truth to that. But the truth is also that we have resources to actually do the work, and then our work will trickle down, and everyone will talk about, which is also true. In the luxury, when I think of luxury, is we really need to rethink what is luxury. I can make you many examples, but a very easy one to understand is caviar. We are still celebrating. It's not rare. You can buy caviar at an airport, and it doesn't taste good to what it once was. It's an old idea. And so as an expert in food, being celebrated for innovation, I can't keep my eyes closed and not point that out. We have to change, and it's uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable. But there are many examples where we're celebrating old ideas. And so what is the new luxury? For me, the new luxury is something that is unique, something that took a lot of thought and time to conceive. So that's on luxury. So we've been thinking about that a lot, and I do believe you can make change in the luxury sector. Then the thing about our food system, and I am not a food system expert or by no means a climate change expert, but I am an expert by seeing the products that come to the back of our restaurant on a daily basis. And in the 30 years that I've been cooking, it has changed what comes to the back door. Certain items used to come, they don't come anymore. Certain items used to be wild, now they're farmed. The taste has completely changed. So we need to really make a radical change. The other thing is, we talk about sustainable farming, and I'm sure there are a few farms out there that do that on a very small scale. But we as a restaurant, and we are a small restaurant in terms of how much product we need, but we had a famous dish that was the roasted duck. And we needed 50 ducks each day. And we had all the resources to find the best farm, to pay the highest price for that sustainably farmed duck. And I have to tell you, that farm doesn't exist. So if we cannot find a farm that can produce 50 ducks a day on a consistent basis in the quality we're looking for, then what does that mean to the chicken breasts you have on your Caesar salad in your hotel lobby, or the bacon and the eggs? And it is really, really disturbing, and we need to eat less meat, and we can start by eating less meat, Meatless Monday. That would make a huge change. What's amazing about this is we're talking about electric car or windmill energy, and all these things take time 40 years until we don't have gasoline cars, 20 years until we have, more windmills, and we can change how we eat tomorrow. So even if it's not the highest of the contributors, by some people it is, but it's definitely the fastest to change, and everyone can be part of that change.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, this idea of how do we accelerate that change? How do we change at the quickest rate possible? I think that's a really important point to talk about. And I wondered, Daniel, obviously you're a leader in the food industry, and I wondered maybe, Dustin, if you could maybe talk a bit about what you see your role being when it comes to, sparking this urgent change that we need.
Well, I wouldn't know. I focus a lot of my time on bringing people that maybe think differently together. So a lot of my time is really spent putting people like a scientist and a writer and a musician in a room and trying to get people to just work together. Because I think that's where the change can happen faster, is if we can work together. And, consciousness, whether that's through new medicines and, building. So I make sculptures, new materials, and storytelling. This idea of how we're going to share these ideas fast enough. And we're at a very interesting place. I think the hard part might be that, look at the future. It's going into the metaverse, right? So our children, I don't know if anyone has children here, you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they want to be a Fortnite star. They want to be an avatar. And that's a real thing, where avatars are replacing humans. And so how do we tell stories that are going to take us away from accumulation, depletion dynamics of capitalism to build new social forms of capitalism, so that, because what are you all going to walk away with? I wonder, you're all, traveled to Scotland, and I really want to know what you're going to go back and do. Daniel's right. Changing your diets, right now you could change the world that way. But, you're 50, 60 people here. How do you get 8 billion people to do that? And that's really, changing the supply chains. That's key. All these things are key, but now we have to figure out how to do that at scale. And to do that, we got to get the youth to really, I think the youth has to actually even go into the streets more. I think people have to, stop eating meat faster, and that could happen through our culture, right? And so I guess finding a common culture that's beyond our states and our nations, and perhaps some of the ideas of identity that we grew up with, and kind of dissolving the ego a little bit faster could hopefully create that state of consciousness where these things will happen. Because that's my fear, is going back on an airplane. We all came here on airplanes, everybody in this room. But I do think you could build a technology, for instance, to take us across the Atlantic that is cleaner, and we could deploy that at scale faster. But again, there's so much ego in corporate, in sort of multinationals. There's so much ego in Hollywood, and in sort of my field, and if people could start working together, it sounds like some bohemian hippie shit, but it's actually it's a true story, and that's what I want. I challenge you,
I can translate what you say.
Can you help me here?
Yeah, I'll translate.
Thank you.
So, what he's saying, I think the private sector has a huge responsibility. I was talking to a friend of mine that is highly, one of the brightest minds I've ever met, and we talk about we can talk figures. The McKinsey report says that it will take $3.5 trillion annually for the next 3 decades to support the new transition. That we are in a transition, by the way. We're in a transition. We're moving. We're not stuck. We're moving. We're moving. Maybe not moving fast enough, but we're moving, guys. We're moving. And so McKinsey's saying that $3.5 trillion a year. The Biden administration budget plan, I don't remember the exact figure that's been trying to pass through Congress, specifically the 1.75 trillion. The specific number for the new economy, the sustainability efforts, it's around 300 billion, and for 10 years. So the private sector has a huge responsibility right now to industrialize what it's been industrialized. It was the private sector that industrialized this world, and it's going to be the private sector which will industrialize this world. And so the financial systems are here. And if there's one thing I'm going to take from the positivity of it, that from a business perspective, the multinationals are seeing their ROI to not act. The business point of this, what is going to be. And Dustin, my kids, and I'm not blind, one wants to be a civil human rights lawyer, and the other one wants to be a journalist, and my 6-year-old wants to be a helper. So no, they don't want to be at Fortnite, okay? Just checking that.
I hope so.
Okay.
I mean,
She's saying.
And Gabriela, I'm really interested in what you're saying about the private sector really needing to step up. And I wondered, what do you think what will it take for the private sector to really stick up? Obviously, you're all kind of leaders in this field, you're kind of doing the right thing, but how do you take others along with you?
I think, let's go back to small, right? When I always say small is the new big, I really think, and my brain keeps on thinking always on concept of small. I think that when Daniel talks about luxury, what he's saying is the concept we've been working, which is honest luxury. This is the transparency. So there's going to have to be accountability and transparency, right? We know what the fossil fuel producers knew. They could have predicted with exactitude what happened. We wasn't transparent. It's the same as cigarettes. It's the same as many of our other industries. This was one that had a damage scale that is huge. So it's going to take transparency. It's going to take accountability. But again, I think they know. We know that if there's not our species to consume the products, unless the algorithms in the metaverse where he's going to be living in are buying their product, would be a chance. But that was even farther than getting the fleet of 99% fossil fuel cars into the future. It's really, really far away, and there's action that's going to be taken in place in the next years. And I think the moment to act is between 12 and 18 months, where we're going to see that real change happen, and they have the responsibility. And whatever access any of us have, and whatever access I have, it's as a friend of my husband says, talk truth to power. So if you have the chance to meet someone powerful that have influence, say the truth that you see, what you're seeing. It may be not entirely truth, but it's a perspective. So to talk truth to power, I never miss that opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the beauties of this conversation that we're having is that, obviously there are a lot of politicians here, there are a lot of scientists, there are a lot of activists. But I think, the role that the three of you as kind of creatives and leaders in creative industries can play as well is really important. And picking on a point that, Dustin, you were saying about, working together and kind of, storytelling as well. I wondered maybe you could talk a bit about that, the overlaps between, the importance of storytelling as you as an artist and maybe in fashion as well, and the role that you have to play in kind of changing the culture.
well, I like movies. Has anybody here seen Fitzcarraldo? Will you raise your hand?
3.
So I think, do you guys like paintings? How many people have seen The Garden of Earthly Delights? The painting. It's in the Prado, Hieronymus Bosch. We have 4.
Five, 6, 7, 8.
So I think, you know, I love children and old people. I prefer them. And because from old people I can learn about their lenses of experience over many, many decades and the world changing. And children haven't been sort of destroyed by the system, so to speak, and actually think in new systems. They're completely plasticity of their neural networks blows my mind. And so I would say for storytelling, you know, I think any way we can do it, right? I think if we can use augmented reality and if we can use our old narrative forms, then hopefully those stories will help us to understand each other just a little bit more. Because that I just, you know, even when I walk through the room here, up here we're all kind of around the same little fire pit. But when you go downstairs, there's 1,000 different fires, right, that people are sitting around. And I think culture, so I'll talk about stories. One story I think is important is science. And I think we need to make science part of culture, just like music. And so,
Which is not a new concept. It's the Renaissance. And if I may add to you, the three of us are storytellers. We're all storytellers, and we have different mediums, and we storytell by our creation. But what he's very good at, and I admire, is the concept that he's putting art and science together. The Renaissance was art and science together. And if we're being shaped right now by two main crises, which is the climate crisis and the digital revolution, the Industrial Revolution saw the arts and craft movement emerge from the spirit. What is that movement in culture, in art, that will counter and tell the reaction to what we're experiencing as a species? And that's what culture and fashion in a degree do. I am starting to see more the intersection of it. And so we're storytelling the new.
And to speak to that, I'd say, in these forums where we're trying to get governments and large bodies to agree on something, it's very challenging, right? It's very difficult to get the US and China to completely agree. And that's at the heart of some of these questions, yes? But I feel like if I sit down with someone from China and someone from India and someone from the EU, that they're all gonna love Nina Simone. They're all gonna be like, maybe they don't know it, maybe it's different from their culture, but they're gonna be like, and you're like, hey, do you know Nina Simone? How many people here know Nina Simone?
Yes.
All right, all right. So I do think that there is something in that can, as you say, expedite this process.
Okay, so I'll translate. Politicians, I have the belief systems that it will be artists and scientists that will take us out of this, not politicians. And I said it in the UN. And I think that it was going to take creativity, the ingenuity of believing that something can happen, plus the strength and parameters and consistency and measurement of scientists. Science is a very creative process. We read the reports, they're very serious, but the creative process to get to that report is never really storytold. Science and arts are very, very close. And that's where, for me, the holy grail is.
And I think ideas, right? Knowledge, and how we share knowledge. An astrophysicist sometimes has a hard time describing their ideas. But I think if we can find new ways to design data to share it faster with everyone, then these processes, to get everyone to go plant-based, we need to expedite the relationship that humanity has to plants. And through culture, I think we can do that. I really do believe that.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's really important in terms of, what we're talking about in sharing knowledge. And, the three of you obviously are all working hard to, reduce your environmental impacts, to create a better future. And I wondered, how can we really get more collaboration across, particularly your three industries, but across, industries more generally as well. And maybe we could talk a bit about, in terms of, food and fashion. There's a lot of overlaps between the two industries. And, we've had the farm to table movement in food. And I think the food industry was a bit further ahead than fashion. But now fashion, there's a lot of talk about the farm to yarn movement. So I wondered, how do we share this knowledge between the industries and really, as we say, accelerate change by sharing that knowledge?
I think I want to just say something about food to table. That was an amazing movement that, was practiced in Europe for a long time ago. But then in the U.S., really, Alice Waters, a Japanese, really championed the farm to table movement, and I think that was wonderful. And today everyone is talking about sustainability, and sustainability is great. But when I think back, growing up in Switzerland, in my childhood 40 years ago, I remember eating a yogurt where the top was aluminum. After eating the yogurt, you wash the plastic cup, and the top is aluminum, so that goes in one place. The cardboard that goes around the plastic goes in another place, and then the plastic goes in a third place. We separated, glass bottles in different colors and so forth. And I'm living in New York City, and we're not doing any of this. We don't even think about it. There's not even a place to do it. So I think we need to stop talking about sustainability so much. I think we need really changing the systems and have radical new ideas how we can do this, because I think it is too late to just be sustainable.
Yeah, for sure. And Gabriela, I wondered if you had any thoughts on this in terms of, how we can increase collaboration between the industries and change these systems. Because obviously between fashion and food, there's a lot of talk about regenerative agriculture, regenerative farming. And obviously there's a lot of, there's a close relationship between the two industries in terms of, the movements that are happening. So how do we kind of share that knowledge and, create change?
There's a lot of parallels between our two industries, and we talk a lot about that. And in actually, when we launched Gabriela Hearst, my husband kept on saying, why aren't you using the wool of your ranch, right? I produce merino wool for your fashion. And I wasn't connecting it till he said it the third time or the fourth time. And we did the vertical exercise. It took us a year and a half to ship it, to work with a mill in Italy, with Loro Piana, we did it, and it was the process that takes you to transparency. Like, I know where my wool comes from, right? Like, I know how we are grass-fed, organic. It's the case of the ducks, right? It's like I knew how that is getting that transparency to fashion, to really, and that's what I try to communicate all the time, that no one is doing it perfect. No one. And we have to take good enough as of now, right? There's always making sure that that's the better technology that we're using. By technology in fashion, I've always looked at the past, to be honest. I always look at what are the materials that have accompanied us through history, which in Roman times was linen, leather, and wool. And wool is a very resistant material. I'm dressed in wool right now. People have this idea of wool as a winter thing, but actually merino body regulates your temperature, hot and warm. And so it's choosing these materials. The solutions are all here. It's as implementing them, and the solutions that where you're talking about the fast change in Chloé, it was easier said because I already had the practice of like I know to use linen because linen don't uses herbicides and pesticides. It has a low impact to the environment, and also it has a nutritional value. So that's a winning fiber. And that's what a winning fiber means to me. That has more than one role, and it has a lower impact. So that's very easy to change the ingredients to better ingredients in fashion. And that's the same that Daniel does. Like he's changing the ingredients that are better for the industry and for all of us.
And do you think that these conversations are taking place? Obviously, the two of you are really good friends. You're having these conversations, but do you think that they're taking place elsewhere?
Yeah, I think if brands like ours are raising awareness to these issues, I think we have very sophisticated customers who then bring this, ask the questions in other places, and I think it creates pressure for others to kind of, move into that same direction.
Well, I can tell you what we're doing at Chloé, right? Because for me, from my industry, is I don't care who comes up with the solution, is somebody can come up with it. So we're having a plan, right? So I realize Gabriela Hearst, by definition, we control the growth. It's a luxury brand. We have a long-term brand and a long-term view on sustainability. So it's controlled. We had opportunities to grow very fast. We declined them. We prefer to grow solid and grow it. That's how we believe. Chloé is a 70-year-old brand of another size. And so the way that I started to realize it's a pyramid, right? On the top of the pyramid, you have Chloé Craft, the 100% handmade product, usually done by a social enterprise. Then you have in the middle of this pyramid, the products that are still high quality, but you use machine, like the tailoring, you use some hand, you use a machine to knit this merino sweater that I'm wearing, you use a machine. So those are still of the quality, but every luxury brand has this, and I think in companies of terms, these products are called volume drivers. So whatever you're making a lot of, right? Whatever you're making a lot of is what we're targeting to change really fast. So changing sneakers, you sell a lot of sneakers, right? 35, 45,000, whatever the numbers are. We design at Chloé for 8 months a sneaker, right? That we're thinking is going to be more sustainable, but then we're not gonna just take our word for us. We're gonna have a life cycle analysis measure, a third party measure that what we thought and put out there is better than it was before. So we compare it to the Sony, and Odd can tell me if the numbers are wrong, but it saved 80% more water, and it had 35% less greenhouse gases emission. So those are good news. So we put the product out there. So then we did the same with denim. We turn it into circular denim. And then we do the same with this tote bag that we change it from cotton to linen. It's all localized linen in Europe. And so we are measuring this. And will take us, what do you think, a year Odd, to get if this formula actually worked. But because what we're trying to do is like, you're growing a company that grows revenue, but you have to lower the imprint. So this is the challenge. So we can tell you how we're doing. That's the strategy.
That's really interesting. And I had a couple of thoughts about that. In terms of what you were saying about, the life cycle assessment. Again, that's the collaboration between fashion and scientists, and really, the importance of sharing information and getting, expertise in all of these different areas. And then I was interested in what you were saying about, reducing your impact, but kind of maintaining that growth. And do you see that as kind of being the secret to this idea of climate success? How do you have a kind of sustainable business model in the long term? This is why I was so passionate about taking the Chloé job, because at Gabriela Hearst I'm really not interested in like having a huge
brand or company. I'd rather build something for the next generation that has another type of, there's a very strategic plan in my head of how Gabriela Hearst is going to hopefully exist after I'm not longer here and I'm in the metaverse with Dustin. But Chloé was already a larger company that employs people. So it's how to help change the infrastructure from within. And so that's what it was a very exciting challenge for me to accept, because the creative language was Chloé. It's something I understand. I'm a Chloé girl. I always loved that brand. So you could put all the extra effort into really help support the environmental and the social conscious, because we're realizing as we're working that the social aspect and the environmental aspect need to be worked together. Usually we're measuring what is your social impact and what is your environmental impact, but everything is tangled in.
Yeah, and I wondered if you could maybe talk a little bit more about that, because I know that we mentioned with Daniel the non-profit work that he's doing in terms of redistributing food, but I know that at Chloé and at Gabriela Hearst, you work really closely with organizations that do have a social impact. So I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that the basic principle for me, if you're not in a position of survival, you have to serve, right? You have to dedicate a part of your life to serve. And if you have a platform, you have to serve within that platform. And the bigger the platform, the more you have to do. So there's a duty into this implementation. So when we're doing a fashion show at 2021 after a pandemic, you want to make sure that deployment of funds is done in good use, not to just self-promote a brand, so that you put the work of others. So when I was named the creative director of Chloé, that you hold, some attention span for a little bit, right? Because there's been fashion designers in other fashion houses. This is not our original concept. We used that attention for showing the work of Bas Trimmer of Shelter Suit, to put another designer that has been working with the most altruistic version of my job. So he's a designer just like me that has a non-for-profit in the Netherlands that helps homeless. So he makes the shelter suits completely out of dead stock, repurposed, made by Syrian refugees, gifted, and they're beautiful. So we did the backpacks. So promoting the works of others, and in the show in New York, in the show in the summer, we used this non-for-profits that build the set, the non-for-profit that build the product. So there were different 7 non-for-profits working in making the show. Those are the bricks that we did. It's a non-for-profit called La Bâtisseur. Steph, did I say it right? The Builders. It's an entrepreneur, social entrepreneur from Senegal, that is teaching women in France how to make bricks, because in Senegal women are part of the construction of houses, and in France it's a male-dominated business. So it's that. We also did pencil case for color therapy that with Karen Dash that we'd send to we also participate with a foundation of art and healing. So you try to put as much good as you can on your platform in an authentic and real way. It has to always come from an honest place.
Yeah, of course. And I wondered, maybe Dustin, if you could talk a bit more about kind of this idea of social impact and purpose, and how you kind of channel that through the work that you do. And you mentioned education, of course, before.
Well, if the fanciest people on the planet buy my art, and they spend a lot of money on it, and I find it unbelievably fascinating. And so someone walks into my studio and they want to give me $500,000 for an object and put it in their house. I almost find it disgusting. And I tell them that they're capitalist pigs. And I say it in a very loving way. I say it with empathy and with charm and respect, but I'm perplexed. I'm like, how many last mile wells, or for sanitation, or for diapers, or I could think of a million other ways to spend $500,000 than on an object to put in your house. So what I do is I use those objects like props in a performance. And once those people gaze at the objects, I slowly do a gnome-like dance to move their gaze over to this other thing called Pioneer Works, which gives a lot of people a platform to make work. It gives scientists and writers and artists and musicians and technologists, you know, a place to go that's free and gives them tools and gives them, maybe more importantly than even a space to work, a community to help them move their work outside of, you know, if someone comes there and they're not making a living and they get a place to kind of learn how to make one and to make work, and they leave there getting a gig, getting a gallery, getting a show at a museum, you know, that to me is the kind of impact, you know, that like I want to use my platform for is I want to actually sort of move that over, if you can, quickly and help other people to...
Yeah, I want to talk about Pioneer Works. Pioneer Works is an incredible space, and whoever has the chance to go to Pioneer Works should do it in New York. It's free. And Dustin is the biggest donor of his foundation. He has given his art to educate others, and he has given the location and created a wonderful world. So his generosity to others is incredible, and he does do the gnome dance. I've seen him do it, and takes the most incredible and influential people to a new set of educations and value system that is extremely honorable and the future.
How are we doing for time? Maybe one more question, then opening up to the floor. I maybe thought we could end on talking a bit about, you know, what are the next steps? What steps would you like to see on this journey to achieving climate success? So maybe Daniel, do you want to start on that?
Well, I think, yes, I would love, and our message is eat more plants, and I think this isn't anti-meat, but it's pro-planet, and I would love to see people embracing, you know, a meatless Monday, for example, and start there, and just making meat less and less part of their diet. In my work, in the beginning, it seemed such a daunting idea to remove all these ingredients out of our repertoire, because we were known for cooking with them, and we were even famous for some of these dishes. But in fact, when we left them behind, it felt extremely liberating and exciting and creative, and so it's actually a beautiful journey. And on top of it, I think, you know, during COVID, the one thing not too many people talked about is the immune system. Like, a lot of people actually died because of a weak immune system, and so actually eating plants also makes you a lot more, it's just better for you. It's actually better for your health as well. So I would like to see that, you know, being done in more places. I would like to see customers understanding that it is expensive to grow and to cook vegetables, so people are actually able to or willing to pay for a main course of carrots or something like that. But because in New York City, if you have a restaurant, you pay for your staff, you pay for, you know, the rent. You're actually not necessarily paying for the food on the plate. And I think that thinking, hopefully we can help changing that, what it means. So like if in 11 Madison Park, carrots are celebrated on the highest level, maybe it will allow for a smaller restaurant to do the same. In my non-for-profit work, we are in a housing project in Queensbridge, which is the largest housing project in America, and we're giving away 500 meals for free that are paid by our guests automatically. We built this into the business model, And but this is just scratching the surface. Like being in these communities is such a amazing experience. And one of my goals is there is a supermarket in that housing project feeding 15,000 people. The supermarket has frozen foods, processed foods. The vegetable aisle is like 6 by 6 feet, and nobody's really using it. And so my idea is to take this to the next level and, you know, take over that supermarket and create sort of a new model for a supermarket of an underserved area and bring healthy foods to these food deserts.
Yeah, and I think the work that you're doing at 11 Madison Park really shows, you know, how you can build purpose into, you know, your business model and make it the core of your business model and extend the reach, as you're saying, and expand it, you know, further and further.
Yeah, it's been an incredible gift for me. You know, I thought I wanted one thing, which is to be the best chef in the world, and when that happened, it felt so empty. And now having this newfound purpose is just such a tremendous gift.
And Gabriela, I wondered if you had any thoughts on what you see the next steps as being when it comes to this journey to achieving climate success.
Well, in our industry and the specifics on Gabriela Hearst that can be amplified to Chloé as well is to make sure that the natural resources that we're using are recycled, repurposed, and regenerative. So making sure that we're leaving our environment the space to heal itself. So I always think of the 3 parameters when designing or creating, if you want to call, fossil fuels, overproduction with overconsumption, and conservation, rehabilitation, and this holistic approach of really being conscious about our consumption of we don't need as much as we are being told that we need. So to really look at your daily life and experience what you need and just have what you not go for quality, not quantity. And so those 3 things to really imagine and work with how can we take the addiction out from fossil fuels in our industries, how we can make sure that we're not being pushed, and those is the low-hanging fruits, the fasting too, the overconsumption and overproduction. The overproduction that's pushing the overconsumption and the conservation. A lot can be done and resolved if we just let the environment heal itself. And we just need to put a lot of resources, a lot of deployment of cash has to be done. It was done before. I've been quoting the exercise of what Teddy Roosevelt did, the youngest president of the United States did at 41 years old. At the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, he saw what it was going to be to the impact of the environment. So he went on to have the natural reserves and parks that we have today in the US. And so we have to go back to that, to really protecting large pieces of scale of environment to let the earth do its thing, heal itself. And I want to make clear one last point. People say, let's save the planet, and that's for me a wrong concept. We're trying to save our species and seeing if our species, the planet is going to be okay without us. So let's be clear that we're doing survival stuff here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll dial in, I'll dovetail, as they say. I'll dovetail right in there, and I'll say that, you know, if we could all just love each other a little bit more. You know, it seems ridiculous, that idea, like outside of our nuclear families. But if we could actually take it outside of the mitochondria that is ourselves and just take it a little bit farther, then our ability to build new systems, because that's what it's going to come down to. It's not about, you know, I'm all about think locally, act, you know, right? But I do believe we have to make major structural changes to the planet and to the way we relate to each other as a species. And we have to do that so fucking fast it'll make your head spin. I mean, it's really, this is not fast enough, you all, just to be clear. I want you all to leave this talk and walk around this car show and think about, think about what you really can do, who you can really bring together faster. I implore you, in fact.
No, I really like this idea of, the importance of building connections with, between each other in order to create the systems change that we needed. And I think that's been a really key focus of this conversation. So thank you so much for your closing thoughts, Dustin. I wondered if we could open it up to the floor and if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask, based on what we've discussed so far. Yeah. So just for the recording, I'll repeat the question. So one of the questions was about foods from the past that was regarded as luxury that maybe we shouldn't be consuming anymore.
I mean, I think my example about the ducks, that we as a restaurant are unable to get 50 ducks on a daily basis in the quality and quantity that we need. That says a lot. Like, just think about, it takes 6 months to raise ducks, 50 ducks a day. Just think about how many ducks there are. So that alone already doesn't look like your idyllic farm anymore. Thanksgiving is coming up in America. There are 45 million turkeys getting slaughtered for Thanksgiving. Where are they? Just think about it. Like, in a way, there are some farms who are raising cattle. They have like 10 cows and they slaughter, once a year. And then in that time, they have these cows, but then you have to use every part of the cow. But restaurants often just use the tenderloins, but there's only 2 tenderloins in a cow. So like if a restaurant goes through 50 tenderloins a day, that's 25 cows, and what happens with all the other stuff? So the cooking also has to change if you're really committed to those kind of products. And then, like in New York in particular, we love to go to our sushi restaurants where the fish is flown in from Japan on a daily basis. I mean, that has to stop. We can't continue thinking that is a luxurious experience. It's more about time as luxury, actually. I in the process of creating this menu, we worked with 2 Zen Buddhist monks. They came from Japan and they taught us the whole philosophy about cooking, the Shojin cuisine. And time was one of the biggest ingredients. The time it takes to grind the sesame and the time it takes to cut everything by hand. They're not using any machines. The time to ferment certain things. Even back to we started our own farm, and the time it takes. We are now thinking of what we're cooking next summer because we need to plant it now. So that's, to me, where we need to be headed. Like items like, the Kobe beef and the foie gras, and I mean, these are old ideas. We need to let go of that.
Thanks, Daniel. And the other question was to Gabriela about...
I want to say one more shocking fact. 80% of the chicken that we're eating has chicken flavoring put into. It's because it doesn't even taste like chicken anymore the way it's raised.
That is definitely food.
I have to follow up that. I'm now in the. It's two ways. Now people reach out, and also it's places where I've worked and admire too. That it's for example, Bass I met through a woman that connected me and said, and it was one of those meetings that you're like, your schedule is so crazy, and you're like, why am I meeting? And then you meet this person that comes with such energy and recharges you and shows you what they're doing, and you just take that opportunity and you push them further. That's what you have to do. So when they come to you with something really good and you have a platform and you have something to give, just like push them forward. And also, so it's both ways. They come to me or I find them. I found him. You want to tell the story? Your version it's more exaggerated. It's better. We were in the Beastie Boys Brooklyn performance of their book, and I feel this energy, and similar to Daniel, it's like energies that I feel that they coming, and like I feel this guy gravity pull, and then we talk for 5 minutes, and I kind of saw his intensity, and then I started to look at his work, made a donation to Pioneer Works, invited him to come.
Well, she invited me to a dinner in her shop.
It wasn't in the shop. It was in the hotel next to the shop.
I said, I did that in my 20s. But someone wonderful who I work with dragged me up there because they said, oh, Gabriela's amazing. And she's married to this amazing man, Austin. And they're this just source of like change. And you need to get in that fucking car. And I was like, oh, no, okay. And I went up there. And then Gabby and I bonded on the 3 rings of love. And I was like a weird little gnome at the dinner table, sat next to her, and I got to...
And then he asked me to join the board, and I said, I don't think you need me. I'm the fake Hearst. You need the real one to help you how to use a board. So my husband became the chairman of his fund.
No, you left out that she said that he would never, ever, ever join the board. And that would be never going to happen.
Yeah, and I had to convince Austin and told him, you never have to wear a suit to this board.
And he's the chairman now, so.
Amazing. I love hearing these stories about how you build, these connections and relationships. Are there any other questions from the floor?
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yay.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And I think it was... Oh, sorry, there is one question.
Actually, it's not a question, it's just to emphasize what you're saying. I was really like, wow, what's amazing people going back to basics, what we are as human beings, and acknowledging the legacy, what our grandparents left to us, how we grow plants, go and plant, touch the ground, feel it. The land is not dirty, it's just you. Sharing just the example of my grandma passed away at 110. She used to tell me, food is waste and waste is food. It's like me, what is she saying? So that is all about. And if you don't look for the solution will find you in the way that you don't want it. So we got to act, as my brother over there say. By the way, I'm Her Royal Highness Princess Abzejigma from Burkina Faso. It has been a great pleasure listening to you, pioneers. So keep pioneering, because we want in thousands of years that we still call you pioneers, that we continue. I thank you very much. It was just a contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I can't think of a better way to end this wonderful discussion today. So thank you, everyone. And thank you to our panelists.